Welcome to DoubleHelix, where we unravel the science of connections. And today in our episode, I'm excited to have a couple people with us, two brothers, Jarom and Heath Thurston. Jarom is an ultramarathoner, which means he doesn't just run 26 miles. That's just a warm-up. He runs the 135-mile races where they're running nonstop for 2-3 days at a time. Just craziness. And then Heath, his brother, is a retired professional triathlete and is very much involved in the swimming community. And so they both actually help do mentoring and coaching and helping those people within the sports that they actually love. We're going to be covering things about how they overcame injuries and different aspects that they went through their process to be able to be the best they can be in their sport themselves. Just like with many episodes, I ask our guests to give us a couple of feedback. What things can we do individually to help us to be better, to improve, to make our lives better themselves when it comes to connections and those around us? We actually found out and we discovered 7 key things that we can do, and you'll find those throughout the conversation, and we'll kind of highlight those for you real quick. Number 1, we'll go into details though, but I'm just going to name these off real quick. Number 1 is get involved. Number 2 is be vulnerable. Number 3 is find your tribe. Number 4, learn to love the journey. 5, ask questions and be curious. 6, support others through tough times. And the last one is embracing setbacks. So don't miss a minute of this. This is a great conversation with a couple of great guys. So really happy to have them with us. So join us right now and let's just get right into it. Well, welcome back, everybody. We want to welcome you back to another episode of DoubleHelix, where we unravel the science of connections. And today we actually have a couple of fun guests on. I have known these two, and I'm going to say it, these two clowns for a long time. I met them both right after my accident. And I keep saying, you guys, we've talked a little bit. Everyone's heard a little bit here and there in the different episodes about my accident. I can promise you this, in the next week, we're actually going to have an episode where someone records me and asking questions about me with my accident. So we're going to go through that and just kind of tell the story. So that way, when I say those things, it all makes sense to you. But who we have with us today are two guys that are, I'm going to be honest with you, my feeling is they're tougher than nails because they're doing stuff that and have done stuff that no way in hell I would want to do. So first of all, we have Jarom Thurston, and Jarom is here. And then we've got his illustrious brother, Heath. And so I've known Jarom and Heath for quite some time. And to be honest with you, I was just thinking, Heath, I don't even remember how we met.
I think it may have actually been through Elevate and SBR.
Okay.
And just through the triathlon coaching that I was doing at the time. And especially the swim coaching, because you were getting into the triathlon.
Yeah. And so those of you that remember, we had that episode a little while back that we had Chandler on. And at the end of that episode, if you haven't seen that, I would encourage you to go back. It was a really cool conversation. Chandler recorded an 8-minute video that he won second place in the high school film festival. And you'll see in that video where they're interviewing Rich from Elevate, and they're actually interviewing, and, Heath, I can't think of his name, SBR. Do you remember his name?
Well, there was Aaron AC and Zara Johnson that started it, but then they sold it to
that's the guy. I can't think of his name. Yeah, it'll come later.
Yeah.
And so they're both in the podcast. You can actually see who we're talking about. So Elevate, and then SBR Sports. And that used to be they're still around, but they're not in that same location, but they were a cycling shop, mostly triathlon shop at that time.
Yeah, it was a multi-sport shop.
Yeah. So awesome. Welcome, guys. Super excited to have you.
Good to be here.
What I'd love if you could each take just a second and kind of, I don't care, you guys can flip a coin or whatever you want. Tell us a little bit about where you're at, what you're doing, and as well, I know I sent you guys some questions, and let's just kind of start chatting, and I'd love to hear what you guys have thought about since I sent those to you.
Go ahead, my elder brother.
Me first, huh? So my name is Jarom Thurston, and me and Heath have a lot of friends in common, but a lot of people that he has dealt with over the years were into cycling and Ironman triathlons. And I got into the ultramarathon running world. And so he knows a lot of my friends that have probably never done triathlons, but do a lot of these hardcore ultramarathons. Yeah, we grew up right in the middle of Utah County. Went to Payson High School, graduated. We swam growing up our whole lives. That was our life. Like we were just swimmers, us and our sisters. Our mother coached us, and we did that all the way through high school, competed very competitively. And now, going fast forwarding quite a bit, because I'm in my 50s now.
Because we're old.
We're old. But now I live in Brazil. So I just got back to Utah, a week ago, Heath, week and a half ago. Came up for Heath's birthday. We went to Lake Powell for a week, and now we're just hanging out together for a month so we can go out to the middle of Death Valley. And we'll talk a lot about that in my story to help a lady athlete who's going to run across Death Valley in the Badwater 135 ultramarathon next month. So that's why I'm here in the States, and then I'll be going back to Brazil after that. Heath, what about you?
Yeah, really, Jarom kind of summed our family up, but really going to what your podcast and YouTube channel is all about. I mean, our family and what Jarom and I have done really our entire lives is it really all has been connections because, from our dad, getting into running as we were growing up and then us getting into swimming and doing all that that led me into coaching, which from the connections that I created and that our mom had from coaching swim our entire lives. And then I was so into sport, and that was just how my brain needed to work. I could not work a office 9 to 5 type of thing.
I don't
had
see
to move
either
my
one of you guys ever being office 9 to 5 guys. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I had to.
Well,
I had to
I
be.
always joke that I do the office thing where I'm just on a computer for hours. And part of the reason why I like to go out and run is because I don't get any steps in all day if I don't. So, I sit and work for 8 hours, then I'll go run for 3 to make up for the difference. But tell him about Dad back in the day and when he first got into doing triathlons.
Well,
and wearing his motorcycle helmet on the bike.
Yeah,
really?
so our
That's
our
how old
dad,
school he was.
our dad, he got into running pretty big when we were all growing up, even though we were all just mostly swimming. We played all the other sports, soccer, baseball, all that kind of stuff, but swimming was kind of our family's thing. Our mom coached the summer league. She coached high school, just that's where we were all connected into that. And then, but our dad, he was kind of the runner and did those other things. And then when triathlon really started growing in the 80s and 90s, there was it was called the Bud Light series that came through all over the US, but one of the races came through Utah. And there was a bunch of local races that popped up during that time and that my dad did. We actually did what my first experience as a triathlon was with my dad and Jarom. It was a local Payson one that we did as a team, and I ended up doing the run, which was funny just because Jarom was older and he was a faster swimmer at the time. And our dad biked because the bike only fit him, and it was pretty funny. It was a miserable run, but just because I was so young. And then, but our dad did one of the Bud Light Series triathlons up at Deer Creek. It was just so funny, but a helmet was required, and he didn't have just a regular bike helmet. He just had a motorcycle helmet. So he's up there on the bike with this big old motorcycle helmet.
Well, it's better than the bike helmet, right? I mean, you crash with that baby on a bike. Yeah.
It worked. It worked. So yeah, that was kind of, and it was funny because for me, then I started I would catch triathlon here and there during when Ironman started getting big, and when the Ironman would show on TV, and it always intrigued me. Just my ADHD brain, having to do 3 different sports and just the activity of that just really always intrigued me. So, as I got out of high school and, had just gotten married, I really wanted to do one. I had done a little bit of running with my dad uh after I graduated high school, but I didn't really love running, but the triathlon thing had always intrigued me. And so then I ended up jumping into triathlon because triathlon again was going through a real big boom right at the end of the 90s into 2000s. And it was really, really just races were popping up everywhere. And so I got to know some of the local race directors and races out there and jumped in one of them. And it was the hardest thing I'd ever done, really, because I was not in shape for it. And I just picked up a really, really old, crappy bike that my wife at the time thought it was ridiculous that I spent $300 on a bike. And little did we know I would have multiple bikes worth way more than our cars years later.
I used to always joke that when I would go racing, I remember I had that old Ford Explorer, and we called it
Yep.
the Exploder, right? And I'd get my racing bike in there and my wheelchair in there, and it was like my bike was worth more than the Exploder, and my chair was worth more. I had more in the back of that sucker than I was just like. So I totally understand that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. By the bikes that I had and that we kept getting because as I got through and more into triathlon, um, uh, yeah, I ended up getting my professional racing, my pro card in 2006, and raced as a pro triathlete for about 8 years, and so that was kind of my career for quite a long time, alongside coaching and things like that.
Yeah, and that's when we met, was in that time period when you were doing those.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. Yeah, my first race on the bike was actually on a hand cycle, was that in 2009. It was the Utah Valley Marathon. And, BYU owned the bike, right? A friend of mine at BYU was like, hey, we have this hand cycle. If you want to use it for the summer, none of the students do. I think it was made in like 1901. It was a solid steel. That sucker, I swear, weighed like 50 pounds. And it was, and so I knew no different. So I'm just working on it. It was a beast to do anything with until
Yeah.
I got my true racing bike. And then it was like, oh my gosh, very, very different from just the average little starter hand cycle to a racing one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. So both Jarom and I, honestly, like going back to kind of what I started talking about was just the connections that we've always had in just sports, training, running, triathlon, swimming. I mean, Jarom could go on for days and days talking about all the connections he has just in Brazil, just with ultra runners, and how he helps coordinate Brazil runners coming to the US to run ultra marathons, and then the US runners going to Brazil to run Brazil ultra marathons. So like, yeah, when we started talking to you about your whole concept of this podcast is, I mean, connections is absolutely everything.
Yeah, it definitely is. So, well, I got a question for both of you, and it comes off of some of that I sent over to you. But I really want to have with Jarom. It was that very first question that I sent you, the focus of, when it comes to the ultra marathons and those kind of races, and as you've gotten used to, you mentioned that you phrase it as it was a journey of both physical endurance and deep self discovery. Right. You kind of had that thought process with that. So how do you see your relationships with your family and friends and the running community that shaped your ability, that helped you push through when the things got hard? Because that's what the connection side. How did those things, when you're really, because dude, 135 miles.
Yeah. Yeah. In the beginning, it was, I mean, honestly, I didn't even like running, never did. I only got into running because my little brother had to do a marathon with our dad, and he finished it. I really didn't think he'd go through with it. He trained for a year, ran the St. George Marathon with my dad, and he finished it. And at that point, I was like, oh man, I wonder if I can do a marathon. And so I got the idea in my head because he did it. And I only wanted to do one marathon and just to see if I could do it. God, this was back in 1999, 2000.
Yeah.
I think when he did his first one. I started training. I remember I lived in Orem at the time, and I started going out on a 3-mile walk, mostly because I couldn't run 3 miles straight. Just because I was thinking, if he does this marathon, I need to start training now because I'll have to do it next year. And I wanted to do it. And while he was getting ready for the St. George Marathon, he had signed up for the Hobble Creek Half Marathon as a training run with my dad. And then he left. He had to go to California for something with some friends or something. So he wasn't going to make it. He wasn't going to be able to do it. So he said, why don't you go run it with Dad? Just take my bib number, because he'd already paid for the race. I hadn't even done 3 miles, but I thought, you know what? I'll do it, even if I have to walk the whole thing, because, I got to get into shape somehow. So I did the Hobble Creek Half Marathon with almost no training to have the right to be there with my dad. The race started. I remember running the first mile, feeling kind of good. And then I'm looking around and no one's walking yet. And I was like, I got to start walking. There's no way I'm going to run this whole thing. But I didn't want to be the first one to start walking. I ended up going 2 miles and then 3 miles. And then I was like, okay, I got to slow down. So I started slowing down. And up until then, I was with my dad, and then I let him get out ahead. And I started doing some walking sections, but I kept running. I got to mile 6. And I was like, this is almost halfway. I'm going to catch up to my dad so he knows I made it this far. So I caught up to my dad. We went through a water station together, and he was surprised to see me. And then I just thought, there's no way I'm going to, finish this. But I did. I kept going. I got to the finish. I finished it in a pretty decent time, just over 2 hours. And I got to the finish line, and I literally almost passed out. I got that tunnel vision. Everything, I couldn't see anything. I had to lay down. All the blood was going to my head or something. And then I couldn't walk for 2 weeks after that. I've never been so sore in my life. And I decided that day, I was like, I need to start training, and I'm going to keep it up because I don't ever want to be that sore ever again. Anyway, to make a long story short, it was a year later, after Heath did the marathon, I went that following year, we signed up and we all did the St. George Marathon. And that's how I got into it. And then for about 5 years, I did a lot of marathons and half marathons. And I got to the point where I just loved it. I loved doing it. And I got into ultras just on a whim through connections again. My sister, our sister youngest, who works as a firefighter, she worked with a guy in her department who did ultramarathons. And she started talking to him saying, yeah, my brother, he runs a bunch of marathons all the time. And he said, oh, you should tell him to do the Squaw Peak 50. And so she told me about this race. And I got in contact with him, and I found out about this. I had no idea what they were. Ultramarathons, 150 miles in the mountains. And I signed up because I thought, why not? I did, a marathon. I wonder if I could do 50 miles. My very first attempt, I DNF'd. I didn't finish. I made it 33 miles, but about mile 20 to 25, I found out I was urinating blood. That's how bad of a situation I was in. And I got to mile 33, and the race staff basically told me I should probably stop because I was at the hardest point of that race. It was going to be 9 miles, mostly uphill, and it was getting very hot in the day, and I was already super dehydrated. And so I DNF'd my very first race. And then a year later, I went back to finish that first ultra marathon. And that spiraled from there. Then I started doing 100 miles, 135 miles all over the place.
Yeah.
But it's having those connections and friends and family. Like Heath can tell you how many times he's been with me, just supporting me out in the middle of the desert, running 93 miles on the Pony Express Trail in a truck, just waiting for me to stop so we could go home. But I have done a lot of races where I'm out there by myself solo, but even then in those races, the other runners are out there. So you're getting a lot of support from them. But it definitely took a lot of support from family and friends who took time out of their day to go support me at some of these races, which is why now me and Heath really enjoy getting back into, I don't do a lot of races anymore. I might do one a year, 2, where I used to do a lot. But now, Heath, we go out to some of these races just to support other runners or triathletes, to do their race, try to give back.
I always felt like when I was racing, it was really cool to see the first guys come across, right? It's like, oh my gosh, that guy's fast. Oh my gosh, these guys are cool. But it was always the last 10% that I wanted to be there at the finish line. The people that had given everything within their whole body there, just to get across the line. And you can just see that. And those were the ones that I wanted to go to. You just want to scream and shout and help them as best you can. And so those were the fun ones to see, those that are having a hard time.
And those are the people that have amazing stories. When you really get to know them, find out how they got there, why they were doing it. It's not because they just grew up athletic and they were always good and it just came natural. And so they just wanted to do it to win, to get all the trophies and medals and stand on the podium. Like there's some, trauma or, some big challenges that they overcame just to get there to almost coming dead last.
Yeah,
they showed up.
Well, and to talk a little bit about on the kind of the question towards Jarom that he was talking about on his ultra marathons is, I've always told people, because I raced, I was a very top ranked Utah swimmer, and then in the professional side of triathlon, I wasn't top, but I was really good, especially on the swim side. And so I was always much faster than Jarom, but I always told people, going into your question for Jarom in terms of the mindset and the kind of those darkness, that was always the thing that took me out of races. And I always told people, yeah, I've always kind of been faster than Jarom, but Jarom, I don't know how he does some of the races that he's done mentally, because he goes into such dark places that I would just be curled up in a ball and he just keeps plodding along and he keeps going and going. And I'm just like, so I've always said, man, when I was racing, if I could have had his mindset with my speed and athletic ability, I could have done some damage in triathlon. But yeah, the ultramarathon, I've done a handful of ultras, nothing longer than I think my longest is 80, but the hundreds and 135s, and I've crewed Jarom so many times. Yeah, it's a whole different ball game. And yeah, the mental side of that, and that is where, the connections of the people around you, that is what gets you through those times. I mean, the one time, his one time that he was running the Pony Express 100, was that your first or second 100? I think it was your first. Yeah, he was literally at 93. Yeah, 93 miles. He was at 93 miles and he couldn't eat anything. Everything he ate tasted like toothpaste and
shampoo.
And I'm out there like, what are you doing? Yeah, it was just crazy. The mental side is a big deal, but having the people with you is part of that to get you through it.
And in some of your questions you sent me, it made me think, we asked about how it's more of a journey than, a race or whatever. When I first went down to Brazil to do my first Brazil 135, and I hadn't finished a 100-mile race yet, a lot of people said I was crazy. I mean, they're like,
I think they said that's a big jump if you hadn't done 100 yet.
I had tried 100 twice. The one I stopped at mile 93, and the second time I made it 72 miles, but I was puking from mile 60 to 72, and I just said, I don't want to keep doing this for 28 more miles. But then I got invited to go do the Brazil 135 by the race director, and some connections that I had made with him and some other Brazilian runners that needed my help to fill out their applications for the Badwater Ultramarathon. He invited me to go do that. And I was like, I'm there. Like, I would love this. I served my mission there and had been back a few times. I was like, I want to go do this race. And I'd already knew that I didn't have the money to pay for a bunch of people to come down with me and crew me. I knew it was a race that you could do solo. Survivor is what they would call it, when you just use drop bags. You don't have any other support other than the stuff that you take down and they'll put at different checkpoints. And I just knew that I could finish that race, but I was going to go down and do it like it was just a journey. Like, I wanted to experience the whole thing. I wasn't going to go race. I didn't care if I was dead last. I ended up 7th overall
Wow.
out of 41 runners that year. International. I mean, this was an international race. I thought I was dead last after 2 nights of hallucinating, and I was alone for so many hours. I hadn't seen any runners. I really thought everyone had finished. But when I did cross the finish line, I found out only 6 Brazilians had finished ahead of me. So I was the first international finisher also. But the whole mindset was, I wasn't there to race anymore. I just was so excited to see the countryside, the mountains. I'd get up. I just wanted to get to the top of the mountain to see what the valley looked like and what the villages were going to look like that I was going to run through. And then I wanted to get to the next checkpoint, which meant I had to go up another mountain and over another mountain. And every time I just wanted to see what was on the other side just to get to the finish line to say I did it. And it was an amazing experience. Like, I suffered. It was hard, but I never got to the point like the first 2 attempts at 100 miles where I was trying my best to win or at least beat all these other old guys. Cause this was back when I was in my early 30s. And a lot of the guys doing the ultras were my age now, in their 50s. But they're the old guys. And I could take off and do the first 40, 50 miles way ahead of them at the time. But by mile 70 or 80, they'd be passing me. So
That
after
reminds
doing
me
that
of,
twice, I just changed my mindset. I'm just going to go and try to enjoy it, be very consistent about my pace and my nutrition. And it was a very spiritual and physical journey to finish that.
Yeah, and that story is very, very similar to, and I can't think of the speed skater's name. If you think back, he'd never
Apollo?
won a gold.
Oh, no?
And
Dan Jansen.
Dan, something, yeah. He'd never won a gold medal, and he was down to his very last race. And I read he was talking about what that experience was before he started that last race, because he went into all the races about, I'm going to win, I'm going to win, I'm going to win. And then that very last race, he, as you mentioned, Jarom, he changed his mindset. He changed it from I got to win to now he was just grateful. He looked at his whole career and how many things that he had done and and how grateful he was for this and that and everything around. And then he went and won the gold. I mean, that very next race, it was like his last race of his career. And so for you not to be able to finish 100 miles and then turn around and do 135 and not be as beat up, it's interesting how powerful our minds are.
Yep. I had no pressure at all. I was by myself. This was 2008. And I remember my family had no idea, how I was. There was no tracking for the race at the time. You couldn't just watch online and see where I was at. I was at mile 95 and I walked into this little town and I went into a LAN house and paid some money to use the computer so I could log into the internet, like dial-up. And I sent one email. I wrote an email, sent it to probably 10 different people, family members, friends, just saying, hey, I'm about mile 95. I'm still alive. I think I can finish this thing. I need to see if I can find that email. And I sent that. And that's the only update they had until I got to the finish and could get a hold of anybody.
And how long was that? How long did it take? How many days was that?
I finished that in 45 hours and 43 minutes, almost 2 full days, just under 48 hours.
135 miles and
45 hours.
Wow.
Well, the Brazil course, it's literally just up and down. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no
the Brazil course is just up and down. It's crazy.
The mountains aren't like the Rockies where you can go up for like 10 miles or 12 miles up to the top and then down. They're shorter, but they're very steep. So you're going 3 or 4 miles of very steep uphill. You can't run uphill. And then you go down and you can't run it's too steep to run. And then it just burns your quads out. It's people ask me all the time, what's harder, the Badwater Ultramarathon in Death Valley or the Brazil 135? They're both 135 miles, totally different environments. One's extreme heat, but it's very runnable. And the other one is very hot and humid, but you get a lot of heavy rainfall too in Brazil. The mud. I mean, that factors in. I got swamp foot. And that doesn't help your speed when your feet hurt really, really bad. But I would always say the Brazil 135 physically is the harder race. Even though my times are almost the same comparing the two races, I just don't do well in the heat. And I'd lose a lot of time where I should run it in 35, 37 hours. It took me 47 to finish the Badwater, in 125 degree heat in the middle of the desert with the crew helping me. So
I mean, I'm just going to say, I there's the snarky side of me that thinks just something's not quite right up here, Jarom.
I don't think there is either.
Because it's like, holy cow. So Heath, I'm curious, you've done a lot of coaching and mentoring. I mean, you helped coach me with my swimming when I started doing the triathlon stuff, which I thoroughly loved. And every now and then and you and I've had conversations every now and then. I'm like, I got to get back in the pool. Right. And now it's different that my legs actually work better. So, I'm not just using a buoy or a wetsuit to float my legs like we did back then. But tell me about the impact that you feel from being a coach and a mentor and with those people that you're working with, and what kind of impacts are you seeing with your students and athletes?
It's funny when it comes to coaching, I always growing up and, after high school, early 20s and stuff, I've really always thought of myself as an athlete. I always, even early on, when I was young, my idol was Matt Biondi, one of the Olympic swimmers from the 80s. I thought I was going to go to the Olympics in swimming, kind of had that dream, wanted to do that. I actually had the quote from Dan Jansen, the speed skater, on my mirror and it used to say, I changed it for swimming and it used to say, I love the 500, I can go faster, because that was one of his mindsets that he used to use. But it was funny because I never really thought about coaching or doing things like that, other than we grew up with our own mother as a special education teacher at the high school and with all ages, but then as a swim coach. And it was funny because our mom was not a good swimmer. She was not at all a good swimmer. She really was absolutely terrible, really. She could do it, but it was not good. But the thing that our mom did really, really well was she could teach. She was just such a good teacher and could explain things a certain way. And so as I got into triathlon and started racing more, got into my professional career, I think I just kind of ended up rolling into the coaching side of things. And that kind of happens with a lot of triathletes and even runners. It's kind of an easy thing to do alongside your training, in order to kind of be able to do your training and maybe make a little bit of money. And so, coaching kind of came easy, but the thing that I found was that how much I loved it. And it's really, really grown over the years as I've gotten older. And especially as I got out of triathlon, I had to kind of fill that void that going from racing professionally and doing that, 100% of the time as a career, even though I was not making much money as a pro triathlete because there's not much money in it. But I had to kind of fill it, and I filled it with coaching, and it was really, really good but I learned so much. The connection that I had with with our mom, of coaching, and all the other coaches that I had worked with all growing up in swimming, in triathlon. I had a number of different coaches. I was able to get coached by one of the greatest in triathlon, which was Mark Allen. And so that really played a big role in teaching me how to coach, basically, and what I wanted to do when I was coaching. And my big thing that I started and I still do now with my swim coaching is I just want to teach kids and adults just to how to enjoy it. That's my big goal of teaching swim, is, competition is amazing. I grew up as a super competitive swimmer and triathlete. And if you want to compete, it's absolutely amazing and fun and great. Mark, how fun competing is, and it drives you and everything. But it's like, I want I want my kids that I teach swimming to really love and learn how to love swimming or how to love a sport. We, our time right now, these days, we have so many kids that are just, they're doing so many different things, and not a lot of it is in sport or in, health. A lot of it is social media and computers, and that's all great. It's a good thing to do, but like sports are really, it's not like they're dying off, but so many kids just don't like sports, or they don't find the sport that they want to really be in, because that's the other problem with sports nowadays is so many kids have to specialize at like the age of 7.
I was
It's
going to say
like,
like 8
okay,
years old. Yeah.
yeah,
You're now a
okay, I'm
baseball
gonna be
player
a
forever and
yeah.
always. Yeah.
I'm gonna be a soccer player, and that's it. And so, when I was coaching, I've coached high school, a few different high school teams, and I've had so many high school kids that wanted to swim, but they were playing football or basketball or doing one of the other sports during that time. And as the swim coach, I would tell them all the time and just say, look, if you can get your coach to let you even come swim a couple of times a week, like, I didn't care. I just wanted them in the pool. I wanted to teach them how to learn how to swim better, how to like it, how to love it. And swimming, as you know, benefits really every other sport.
Yeah.
But so many kids, they, in so many high school sports, like, you can't miss anything, and I just want, kids to, whatever sport it is, I want them to just love it. And I love teaching. I love, when kids have that, and adults have that light bulb moment that goes off when all of a sudden they get the stroke right, or they get the rotation, or their arm, or they see that their time is dropping, and it's really, really fun to watch.
Well, I know that, I mean, I knew how to swim before you and I started working together, but I didn't know how to swim effectively. Right.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling like in that first triathlon that I did, I remember, I should say the first and only, because I just ever did the one. I went right back to hand cycle racing.
Yeah.
But that triathlon, I just remember feeling like it was interesting while I was doing it. What am I doing? I'm echoing things that I've heard you tell me, because I wasn't stretching far enough for my stroke. They were all too short. So I just felt like I wasn't going very fast. And I remember, okay, relax, make it stretch, all these little things that there was Heath's voice in the back of my head, right? Too.
And with somebody with limited leg movement, we had to work on a very different approach of your stroke. And so I had to adapt how I taught you to compare to almost anybody else, because your legs did not work the same as most people. So we have to work on, okay, how do we make Mark's upper body move in a different way that is going to work with his legs? And
it became actually, in the way when you redid that and you kind of rethought that training, I actually got to where I was pretty decently fast just with arms.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that really surprised me. I remember being in the pool. I don't know if you went with me over to American Fork Pool the one time. And I remember going over to the pool and I'm just swimming away. And I was shocked that I was passing people that were kicking. Right. It's like, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Right. And so, no, I agree. Swimming is those exercises and those things touch into so many different things. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
Jarom, you've had injuries and setbacks and those kind of things. We all do as athletes, you bumps and bruises. Holy cow, I fell, I got hurt, whatever, or I'm peeing blood. I'm just gonna say, right?
Urinated blood. It happens.
That's where I kind of go, right. But we've all experienced some of those downsides and things like that. And that's a whole different ball game to go through, right? The beginning of a race, we always feel, man, I got this. I don't think any one of us start a race going, I don't think I'm going to finish. Right. No. None of us start a race with that mindset. Right. But you get so far into it. And my very first marathon, I didn't finish. because I did something stupid like at mile 12 or something like that. I do in St. George. But how did you, from the athlete side, what were you seeing, and how did your whether it was your own spiritual connections, your own emotional, mental connections, how did you manage to deal with those things to be able to get back out there, right? Because getting injured is one thing, but getting back out there, it's the John Wayne, you got to get back up on the horse, right? It's the same kind of thing. So how did you manage that?
Luckily, I didn't have any really worst one that I remember that took me out for a long time was a stress fracture in my lower left leg. And the only thing I could do for a year was bike. And this was, I had done a couple short triathlons with Heath way back before I was doing ultras, when I was just getting into running. But then I just got into the ultras and did those for so many years that when I got that stress fracture, I could only bike and it didn't hurt because I was having a hard time. Like, I could go walk and do okay, but I didn't want to just walk. I wanted to run, and I would start running and it would just hurt. And so I started biking, and that just actually threw me and Heath and our dad into another world of cycling together, where we started doing 100-mile century rides. We ended up doing, I don't know, 10 or 12 of them. We did a lot of them together. In fact, we did the Hoodoo 500 as a relay team here in southern Utah. Took, what was it, third, our team with our dad?
Yeah.
We took third, 500 miles biking, taking turns. So that.
What time? Okay, but what time of year is that race?
That was in the
September or October.
So it's still warm, still heats up in the day.
Cold at night.
Cold at night. Yeah, I was going to say, you're that September, October. That's the same time period as the St. George Marathon, right? So, you start off freezing your fanny off, but then you get warmed up as the day goes on.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that just kind of showed me that, there are other things to do, when you have those setbacks, to wait to heal, physically and mentally. But at the time, I remember thinking, if this leg ever gets better and I can run again, like, I'm going to take it easier. Like, I was always trying to push myself, back. And, I'm a bigger guy. I think Heath is, bigger guy. No one ever looks at me and says he looks like a Kenyan runner, because I don't. I've always been close to the Clydesdale size. But I've run under a 3:30 marathon, back in the day, multiple times. And doing these hundreds, it's not about speed, but I always wanted it to be. I tried to make it that way when I was younger until I had that injury. And I remember thinking, like, to do 100 miles, like, you don't have to run 6-minute miles, 7-minute miles to do really well at these races. You just have to be consistent and not stop and not blow up and not get injured.
Which is why the old guys were passing you at mile 70.
It's
right.
the tortoise and the hare story. And it just took me years to figure that out. And so when I started getting really good is when I realized I can keep going and just, slow it down a bit and actually enjoy the race, make it a journey. Because running 100 miles is not like a 10K where you're out there pushing it and you're going to be done. And then you get your ice water and Gatorade and banana and a donut and enjoy, the rest of your afternoon. You're out there for a day and a half, 2 days, unstop. I mean, it is a lot of physical and mental to get through. And so you have to really know how to control a lot of things. Prevention of injuries, knowing when you're getting a hot spot on your foot to do something about it before it ends up being a blister that slows you down to a crawl and all that stuff. So getting through those things was, injuries, setbacks. I did have another injury. Sorry. And this will help answer your question also. I went with two of my nieces to hike the big mountain in Payson, Utah that has the P on it that you can see from I-15.
Yeah.
I hiked with two of my nieces up there one summer. And on our way down this really steep part of the section, they were both sliding down on their bums. And here comes Uncle Jarom. Like, I'm a trail runner. Like, I can run down this thing. They're like, Uncle Jarom, get down, slide like us. I'm like, no. And the next thing you know, I rolled my ankle and then I rolled down the hill and I thought I broke my foot. It swelled up and went purple within minutes. And that took me out for months. Luckily, it was just a really bad sprain. And so it did heal up. And I went back and did a 50-mile on it, maybe 3 or 4 months after that. But I remember going through about 2 years, 2012-ish to 14, where for the first time ever, and maybe it was a little bit of depression, I don't know, I was just unmotivated. I didn't want to go out and run. I wasn't motivated or interested in signing up for races anymore. And this was after years of me thinking, I'm going to be this great ultra runner for the rest of my days.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I was in this funk where I gained a lot of weight, didn't care about running. It was kind of sad, but I really just wasn't interested in it. And then it took me 2 years to finally get that fire back. When once again, I decided I wanted to go and do the Brazil 135 again. I had finished it 4 times in a row, every year, 4 years in a row. And it took 5 years for me to get back and do it again. And that's when I decided I wanted to do it a 5th time. And I started training again in 2015 for a whole year, lost 30 pounds, went back and did the race again. That was 2016. So that's been almost 10 years where I've had that same mentality that I had before, where like, I kind of don't want to stop. It's just part of my lifestyle. I always want to get out almost every day and run. But that's a hard setback too. Some people may not get injured. They just get to a funk and they just don't want to.
And that's a different, it's not just physical, right? I mean, you can get physically hurt or you went through a mental funk for a little while. And that in itself is every bit as debilitating as physical, and sometimes more.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I suffered a lot from pretty severe depression and anxiety for a lot of my adult life. From different things when I was younger and just going through life in general. But I had pretty severe depression and anxiety, and I remember going to, I'm a professional triathlete, going to these big Ironman races, and many of them, my wife at the time when we were married, we didn't make a lot of money, so it's not like we could travel to all the races together and do these races and get the hotels. And I was lucky if I could, as a pro, get a homestay with a local person there. But a lot of times I couldn't, so we were trying to find just a cheap hotel. And I remember just trying to just will myself to not be so depressed to even get to the start line. But I also knew from experience that if I can get to the start line and just get started, I'll be okay. So I'd have to go through these real checklists. And, I really mentally had a hard time for many, many years, just getting to a lot of races and a lot of start lines, just to be, feel okay. And then it was the mental battle of racing and just, trying to push yourself and not get, discouraged when you're getting passed or whatever. So
yeah, no, that's always discouraging when you're in that certain point, whatever happens. And I can think in races, I was always discouraged when someone passed me. So you're like, no. So
yeah.
Well, a couple things that we're coming up on. I'd like to wrap up here in a couple minutes, but what I'd love to have is really, as we wrap up, I'd like to have you both, from your perspective, if you could give somebody 1 or 2 things from your experience that they could do today to help them in that journey, whether we're not talking to, ultra marathons, right? Or triathlons, but what's 1 thing or 2 things that someone could do today to help improve their overall connections, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, through athletics?
I'll go first.
Yeah, go, Jarom.
I would say the first thing, one of the easiest things you do is get involved. Like whatever sport it is, whether it's running, triathlons, baseball, get involved, find out where there are events and volunteer. Like in the ultramarathon world, you don't have to run an ultramarathon, but there's a lot of people that need support, that you can sign up and be on their support crew. And you just have to be out there to follow along, give them food and water and encourage them, get them to the finish, sign up as a volunteer at an aid station at a marathon. You start doing those things. One of the biggest things that got me into it when I really didn't know if I could do like the Badwater ultramarathon, it was the first year I crewed the first Brazilian woman who ever finished that race. I was on her support crew. This is a lady who had cancer twice, and she was a lot older than I was at the time. And she finished it. I remember halfway in the middle of the desert, I was like, she's going to finish this. And I started thinking, I think I could do this. I wasn't anywhere near being at the point where I could do something like that. But because I was out there watching other people do it and seeing that they aren't like the perfect best athletes in the world, but they're trying to do it, is really something that showed me that, hey, I can do this. And that really motivated me to get out and see if I could do it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. How about you, Heath?
You know, I do, I work alongside some of the coaching and just the training I do. I work construction now. And it was funny with this question and Jarom's answer. The thing that popped into my head was I was talking to my boss one time about just some other subcontractors and some other jobs that the subcontractors that we work with. And I was asking him, what do they do? How does this work, or how does their machine work? And he actually said something really interesting, which was, oh, you should ask them. They love talking about it. And that goes along with what Jarom said, and with what we're really trying to say is, yeah, if you get a little vulnerable. I mean, I've worked with so many adults on the swim side that they were petrified to, basically, as an adult, they were embarrassed. They're petrified of the water. They're embarrassed to go and say, I need to learn how to swim. So if you can be vulnerable, that is one of the biggest benefits that can actually help you progress in whatever journey, whatever road, whatever path you're trying to go down. I mean, a perfect example is, my wife now, we would have probably never met, but she had just gone through a divorce, and I was coaching masters swim at the time down here, and she just had always wanted to kind of learn how to swim and do triathlon, and she ended up thinking that the triathlete, that group of people, was a little bit more aligned with her mindset and who she was, and it's the only reason she kind of started coming to a swim group and everything, and it's been awesome to have that connection that we look back on now. But it was because she just knew she was vulnerable enough to be like, yeah, that's something I'd like to try out. Because a lot of people, and especially as adults, we have a tendency to stay in our path and stay where we're comfortable, and we don't step out of that comfort zone too many times. And it really hinders us to find the things that we might love. I think about, I've always wanted to learn how to play guitar, and I look at guitars on Marketplace all the time, and I still have yet to just get one. And I need to do it, and I need to just step out and do it.
I think you need to follow Big Brother's advice. Just get involved. Go get it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'll write the song because I do the poetry. You can learn to play.
Exactly. So that's my biggest advice, and just whatever you are doing, just really just learn how to love it first. It's always great to push yourself, but going to people that are in that sport or whatever you're interested in, like that, like my boss had said, they love and want to talk about it. I love when people come up to me and ask me about swimming or triathlon. I can, like our podcast, me and Jarom could keep talking to you for 5 hours. And
I know that.
keep going. So that is the big thing, is if you have questions and everything, find somebody that's in it and just ask them. It's also the same with, I'm sure with your injury and your accident, you'd much rather somebody come and talk to you about it and ask you rather than just kind of look at. My oldest daughter is special needs, and she walks a little different, and she has a traumatic brain injury, and she has certain things. So we love to talk about it. We would much prefer people.
Right.
And I think we have a tendency to not do that as people.
Yep. Well, guys, thank you very much. The last thing I'm going to say is one for each of you. Heath, how do people, if they're in the St. George, Utah area, how do they get, can I put some information up in the description, how they can get in touch with you for swim and try and stuff like that?
Yeah. I have a website, blacklineswimming.com, blacklineswimming.com. And then, yeah, you can put on my phone number too, if you want. Or whatever.
I don't know if we'll go that far, but we'll at least get the website up and stuff. So they have a way to get a hold of you, right? If they're interested in that kind of stuff and having these conversations. And Jarom, when it comes to the big bad, I'm running till I die races.
If you have anyone interested in learning more, wanting to get into ultras, or if you have listeners who are already doing ultras and they want to go to Brazil, get in touch. I can definitely help out. I'm on all the socials. You can see my name right there. Just spell it Jarom Thurston. I'm the only one you'll find with that name on Instagram or Facebook. Or
yes, I'm sure.
Jarom.Thurston@gmail.com. But yeah, I've helped a lot of Americans and others come down to Brazil to do the Brazil 135. Usually we get an interpreter, translator on the crew. So someone who speaks English and Portuguese, and it's a blast.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for coming on, and want to make sure that I appreciate you both taking time. And Jarom, even though you said you came up because of his birthday and to help someone at the Badwater 135, we all know that it was really to be on the podcast because that's really what it was. Right?
That's it. He
Thank you guys.
Know we were going to do it right before I was traveling. It's like, on Saturday, the day I was going to get there, and then my plane was late. That didn't work out.
No, that's understandable. So I do enough travel domestically that sometimes those airlines things happen. So thank you again, guys. I so appreciate it. And thank you everybody for tuning in today. And hopefully you got a little bit about some of those, how those connections and how to get past some of the struggles that you may have, whether it's mental, emotional, physical, whatever it is. These guys actually know what they're talking about. They've been down that path. And so we so appreciate them coming on. And thank you, everybody. And we'll see you on the next go around.
Thank you.